What truly destroys a powerful person? Not defeat, not poverty, not even death. What really consumes them from within, sometimes slowly and silently, is indulging in what they should have never tolerated. There are moments in life when a single concession, a moment of weakness, or a false belief can seal our fate. No one has to betray us with a dagger. It's enough to let them stay close when we already knew they weren't loyal. The enemy doesn't need to conquer us from the outside if we've tolerated cowardice, negligence, or apathy within our own walls. True failure rarely arrives as a surprise. It shows up step by step after we've accepted what we knew we should never have allowed. Niccolò Machiavelli, with his sharp and raw understanding of human nature, grasped this better than anyone. He didn't write for kind hearts or for the naive. He didn't sweeten his words with moral platitudes. He wrote, rather, for those willing to face what most people prefer to avoid, that in this world, power, respect, and stability are not upheld by good intentions, but by hard decisions, and sometimes, with a kind of strength that makes others uncomfortable. There are lines that, once crossed, have no return. And there are behaviors that, if tolerated, become the inevitable ruin of everything we've built. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you forgiven someone you knew shouldn't be in your life? How many times have you indulged behaviors that made others lose respect for you? How many times have you stayed silent when you knew speaking up was the right thing to do, but you were afraid of the backlash? This isn't about being perfect. It's about not being stupid. Some mistakes cost little, but others cost everything. Machiavelli didn't write to be liked. He wrote so you wouldn't be destroyed. And his message is still uncomfortably relevant. In a time like ours, where image is everything, where seeming kind is more important than being effective, and where many confuse tolerance with weakness, his ideas feel like a slap in the face, a necessary one. Because while you hesitate, others advance. While you justify, others plot. While you forgive, others are already figuring out how to use you. There are people who only smile at you as long as you're useful. There are allies who are really just waiting for you to let your guard down. There are flatterers who don't believe in you, but know you can give them something. And the worst part is we often know it. We feel it in our gut, we sense it in their gestures, we hear it in the tone of their voice. But we pretend it's nothing. Because tolerating is often more comfortable than confronting. But Machiavelli would tell you that comfort is the beginning of your fall. It's not about distrusting everyone. It's about not trusting anyone blindly. It's not about acting with unnecessary cruelty, but about not hesitating when firmness is the only thing that can save you. It's not about living in fear, but about understanding that the world doesn't run on kindness. It runs on strength, strategy, and constant vigilance. Tolerating the intolerable is opening the door to disaster. And sometimes, that disaster comes disguised as kindness, compassion, or giving a second chance. But some things don't deserve second chances. Betrayal, for example, or repeated cowardice, or disrespect, or constant indecision, or laziness disguised as calmness. There are attitudes that seem small, but are seeds of collapse. A leader who tolerates disloyalty becomes a hostage to his own allies. A man or woman who gets used to letting insults slide gradually loses their place in the world, until no one fears them, no one respects them, and no one follows them. And no, this doesn't just apply to princes or rulers. It applies to everyone. To you, to me, to anyone who wants to live a dignified, strong life built through effort. Because each of us is, in a way, a small prince. We rule our time, our decisions, our relationships. And every time we tolerate something that goes against our deepest principles, we're giving up that power. We're letting chaos slip in through the back door. And what is that chaos? It's that person who lies to you and you let it slide. It's that friend who's never there when you need them, but you keep them close anyway. It's that inner voice that says, don't make waves, just stay quiet. It's that tendency to believe things will work out on their own, when you know that nothing changes unless you take the lead. It's that belief that the world is fair, even though reality has disproven it 1,000 times. Machiavelli wasn't a cynic. He was a realist. He saw the world as it is, not as we wish it were. He understood that nobility doesn't mean allowing everything. It means drawing firm lines. That respect isn't begged for, it's imposed. That kindness without strength is a flower that withers in a storm. And that those who survive aren't the kindest, but the most prepared, the most lucid, and those who know when to say, "This is where I draw the line. No further." That's why talking about what we must not tolerate isn't an exercise in cruelty, it's an act of clarity. It's understanding that you can't build anything solid if you don't first learn to say no. That you can't protect what matters if you don't recognize what threatens it. That you can't move forward if you're dragging people who only get in the way. There are moments when a firm decision, even if it hurts, saves your life. There are days when saying no more gives you back the respect you thought you'd lost. And there are behaviors that, if not stopped in time, become illnesses that infect everything they touch: your work, your family, your mental health, your energy. So let's return to the original question. What truly destroys a powerful person? The answer, perhaps, isn't in what others do to them, but in what they choose to accept. Because in the end, no one falls because of what they can't control. We fall because of what we choose to allow. There are those who believe that danger only comes from the outside, from declared enemies, visible attacks, or crises that strike with noise and force. But the real threat rarely shouts. It whispers. It slides in disguised as friendship, as routine, as misunderstood tolerance. What's truly destructive doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits beside you, smiles, and tells you it's not that serious. One of the most frequent and most costly mistakes is tolerating mediocrity. It seems harmless. It doesn't hurt you directly, doesn't openly betray you, doesn't throw visible darts. But it slowly eats away at everything from within. Allowing someone to constantly give the bare minimum, to make excuses over and over again, to do just enough not to get fired or to avoid losing your friendship, that is accepting that not enough becomes the norm. And when that happens, standards drop. No one strives anymore. No one goes the extra mile. No one uplifts. Everyone just floats. And what floats eventually sinks. Machiavelli knew that a prince surrounded by mediocres is doomed. Not because they're evil, but because they lack the fire needed to sustain something great. And this applies to our own lives too. If we allow the people around us to live with apathy, sooner or later, their passivity becomes contagious. Nothing spreads faster than a lack of ambition. And nothing is sadder than watching someone powerful, someone brilliant, drown in a web of excuses and lukewarmness they chose not to cut. But mediocrity rarely comes alone. It often brings something even more toxic: disloyalty. Not the loud betrayal you can easily spot, but the quiet kind, from those who support you in public but undermine you in private. From those who applaud you while planning their exit. From those who offer help, but only when everything's going well. Real disloyalty doesn't break bridges in one blow. It slowly rots them until one day, you can't cross them anymore. And what do? In most cases, nothing. We tolerate it. We look the other way. We make excuses. We say, nobody's perfect, or everyone has the right to make mistakes. And yes, that's true. Everyone makes mistakes. But some mistakes are accidents, and others are choices. If someone repeatedly chooses not to be there for you when you need them most, it's not a slip-up, it's a message. And you decide whether to ignore it or take it seriously. Tolerating disloyalty is one of the most dangerous forms of self-deception. Because by keeping close those who no longer believe in you, you're weakening your own army. You're giving power to someone with no commitment. You're letting the enemy sleep inside your walls. And Machiavelli knew this well. A lukewarm friend causes more harm than an open enemy. Because you can confront the enemy. But with the lukewarm one, you don't even know how to start the conversation. And if mediocrity and disloyalty are silent poisons, cowardice is a contagious disease. It's not about feeling fear. We all do, but about letting that fear become a way of life. Surrounding yourself with people who never take risks, who always wait for someone else to decide, who live in the comfortable paralysis of, it's better to do nothing. Tolerating cowardice in others is allowing their shadow to spread over you. Because those who don't dare will sabotage those who do. They resent bravery because it reminds them of their own cage. And they'll do whatever it takes to make sure no one escapes it. Machiavelli understood that ruling and living boldly requires courage. Not the impulsive courage of someone who acts without thinking, but the strategic courage of someone who chooses to face the uncomfortable before it becomes uncontrollable. If you allow fear to rule the decisions of those around you, that fear will soon reach you. And when the crucial moment comes, no one will have your back. You'll be left alone with your doubts. Cowardice often brings with it another toxin: Flattery. A sweeter, more seductive form of betrayal, but just as destructive. Flattery isn't respect, it's manipulation dressed as affection. Someone who flatters you endlessly, who always agrees with you, who never contradicts you, that person isn't helping you. They're using you. They're inflating your ego while they wait to get something in return. And the most dangerous part is that, if you're not careful, you'll start to believe them. Believing you're always right. Surrounding yourself only with those who applaud you. Living in a bubble where no one dares to challenge you. That's the beginning of the end. Because you stop seeing reality. You stop hearing criticism. You become deaf to the truth. And a leader, or a strong individual, cannot afford that. They need allies, not subjects. They need brave voices, not submissive echoes. Machiavelli didn't write to flatter. He wrote to shake people awake. And what he reminds us is that the worst mistakes aren't made in a moment. They're allowed over a long period of time. They're fed with silence, with gestures of weakness, with tolerances disguised as kindness. What gets accepted, gets repeated. And what gets repeated, becomes rooted. Don't tolerate injustice just because it doesn't affect you directly. Don't tolerate lies just because they come from someone you love. Don't tolerate negligence just because it's always been like that. Don't tolerate a lack of character just because that's how they are. Don't tolerate what you know corrodes, weakens, or destroys. Because if you do, you're destroying yourself too. Some behaviors seem small, but they're the beginning of a great loss. A single act of disrespect left unchallenged becomes permission for more. A betrayal forgiven without consequence becomes routine. An excuse accepted without demanding accountability becomes an unspoken norm. And when that happens, you can't blame others anymore. Because it was you who allowed it. You who didn't draw the line. It's easy to think being firm is being cruel. But there's a big difference between being tough and being ruthless. Being firm is about protecting what matters. It's about guarding your dignity, your time, your energy. It's choosing not to let the worst take root just because no one wants to be uncomfortable. Because in the end, what's truly cruel isn't saying no. What's truly cruel is living surrounded by things that don't belong there, just because you didn't have the courage to remove them. Machiavelli knew it. And you do too. You felt it. You've seen it. You've lived it. So the question is no longer which behaviors should not be tolerated. The question is, are you going to keep tolerating them? There comes a moment in life when you can no longer pretend to be blind. When the signs are too clear, when the consequences pile up like stones in your pockets, you realize, sometimes the hard way, that tolerating the intolerable is not a virtue, but a betrayal. Not of others, of yourself. Because deep down, every time you allow something you know hurts you, you're abandoning yourself a little. You're telling the world, this is what I believe I deserve. And that's the most heartbreaking part, realizing that, often, it's not others who are hurting you, it's you, by choosing not to set boundaries. By justifying the unjustifiable. By accepting the unacceptable. Not necessarily out of weakness, but out of fear. Fear of losing. Fear of being alone. Fear of seeming harsh. Fear of being wrong. But there are losses worse than being alone, staying surrounded by people who don't respect you. There are lonelier places than solitude, feeling betrayed in a crowd. And there are greater mistakes than seeming too strict, being too available to everything that breaks you. Machiavelli understood this, not from cold calculation, as many have misinterpreted, but from the brutal clarity of someone who knows that life, like power, demands constant inner vigilance. Because kindness without discernment is naivety. Tolerance without limits is complicity. And forgiving someone who shows no remorse is not virtue, it's self-deception. In practice, this means you must look at yourself with brutal honesty. Ask yourself, how many things am I tolerating out of habit? How many people are still in my life not because they add value, but because I'm afraid of what might happen if they're no longer there? How many behaviors do I excuse because, deep down, I believe it's the best I can get? These questions hurt. They hurt because they force us to admit we've built parts of our reality with rotten materials. That we've maintained relationships, jobs, and decisions from a place of broken hope. From a blind desire for things to change on their own. But nothing changes unless you change first. Transformation begins when you dare to do something deeply uncomfortable, review your loyalties. Not just toward others, but toward yourself. Who am I being loyal to? My values or my need for approval? My inner peace or my fear of conflict? My growth or my comfort? Because if your loyalty lies in avoiding discomfort, you will always end up betraying who you really are. And that betrayal has a cost. It's paid in silence, in resentment, in lost self-esteem, in the vague feeling of being alive but not truly awake. When you tolerate the unacceptable, you slowly drift away from yourself. Not in a dramatic way, not through a major rupture, but through thousands of small daily concessions. A disrespectful comment you don't respond to, a broken promise you overlook, a behavior that hurts you, but you think it's not that bad. And like that, without even noticing, you're no longer at the center of your life. You're on the sidelines, watching others do and undo while you remain silent. Machiavelli might have said it differently, but the essence is the same. You cannot keep control of your life if you give power to those who don't deserve it. You cannot build something solid if you let the termites stay. And you cannot expect respect if you keep putting yourself last. Dignity isn't begged for, it's exercised. And it is exercised, above all, when you dare to say, enough, not in anger, but with conviction. That takes courage. And it also requires accepting an uncomfortable truth. Some people won't understand. Some will walk away. Some will call you cold, arrogant, insensitive. But you must remember, their judgment does not define your worth. What defines you is your ability to live with integrity, to act according to what you know is right, even when it hurts, to look in the mirror and say, I didn't betray myself. And in that process, you'll discover something else. Many times, we tolerate the unacceptable not out of kindness, but out of fear. Fear of rejection, of being wrong, of losing love we already feel is scarce. But living from fear is a sentence to a diminished life. Because everything done from fear ends up chaining you. And no matter how decorated a chain is, it's still a chain. And what happens when you start letting go? When you say no? When you close doors? When you walk away from those who don't honor you? At first, there's vertigo, discomfort, sometimes guilt. But then something priceless appears, clarity. The air becomes lighter, your energy cleaner, your heart calmer. You discover that you can be alone without feeling abandoned. That you can lose affection without losing yourself. That you can be firm without becoming harsh. That you can love without allowing love to become an excuse. And it's there, in that clarity earned through struggle, that you reconnect with your strength. With that part of you that doesn't need to beg for affection, compromise your principles, or drag along relationships out of fear of having nothing. Because the only thing you truly need to live fully, you already have it, your own awareness. Your ability to see, to decide, to act with integrity. And when you act from that place, everything that enters your life, people, opportunities, experiences, carries a different quality, a different vibration, because it resonates with what you're no longer willing to betray. Machiavelli, so often misread as cynical, wasn't promoting cruelty, he was promoting clarity. His message wasn't, do whatever it takes to win, but rather, don't lose what's essential clinging to what's comfortable. At its core, he spoke of courage, of the need to maintain a firm center in a volatile world. And that's exactly what each of us needs today. Courage. To speak the truth. To cut what hurts. To demand respect. To refuse less than what an awakened soul deserves. Because if you're not the guardian of your own life, no one else will be. If you don't set your limits, someone else will, to suit their own needs. And if you don't decide which behaviors are unacceptable, you'll end up accepting everything. Even what breaks you. Even what dims your light. So when doubt wraps around you, and you ache for what you've lost, remember this. Sometimes losing is the first step to finding yourself again. Sometimes closing a door is what lets the light in. Sometimes the most loving act isn't staying, it's walking away. And sometimes, the noblest thing you can do for yourself is to stop tolerating what sabotages your greatness. So the next time someone crosses the line, ask yourself, does this honor me or wear me down? Does this build or destroy? Is this love or fear in disguise? And if the answer doesn't bring you peace, then you know what you have to do.